Hello and welcome to Take Sports Podcast, where we sit down each week and talk about whatever sport we want to talk about in one take, unscripted, but with research. I'm sitting here with Steve, who will talk a little bit about who we are and what we want to do here. Steve?
Like John said, my name is Steve, and I'm a longtime basketball fan. I've been following the game for a long, long time. I've played for many years, and it's actually one of my first loves. So it's nothing I like doing more than talking about the game, analyzing the game. And we have John with us today, and he definitely is more of the coach type, and he's actively plays the game now, and he's a very big X and O's guys, and he can really break down the game for a lot of us here. But at the end of the day, we are fans. That's what we do, and we just simply love the game, and that's why we're here. And just like to share some of our thoughts with everybody out there, maybe a little bit of knowledge, maybe you can learn something.
Thank you, Steve. So today we're going to be talking about the basketball week that is upcoming, sort of the big news that's going on in the NBA right now. Obviously, the big news, start of Summer League, started today. We're not really going to touch on that too much because, honestly, there just not enough has happened yet. But there are tons of rumors going around NBA free agency right now. And we just like to sort of sit and talk about some of the bigger names that are out there and where they would fit on different teams and maybe what teams would really benefit from having those names added to their roster.
Well, obviously, starting a great jumping off point, obviously, is going to be LeBron James, who's been the talk about the offseason. But ironically enough, things have actually been very quiet on the LeBron front. I think he learned his lesson from the last time he was in free agency. And you definitely can tell he's keeping things very quiet. But there is news lately that his agents are meeting with a bunch of teams out there, and there are a lot of intriguing teams he could go to. And, for a great place to start off, John, I'll let you talk a little bit about your thoughts on the Rockets and if they can get them.
So, as Steve sort of said, I'm a big Rockets fan. They are my main love in sports is following the guys in red and white. Obviously, as the Rockets look forward into the 2014-15 season, we have arguably the best shooting guard in the NBA, arguably the best center in the NBA, one of the best defensive point guards in the NBA. We can bring back Chandler Parsons. I'd say that as far as, the 1, 2, 3, and 5 go, we're really locked down. LeBron James, bringing him in as a power forward, obviously he's the best player in the world right now. And anytime that you can bring him in, a guy who can play the 4 or the 3, anytime you bring in a guy his caliber, that just instantly puts any team, it doesn't matter what team he's on, it just instantly puts that team into championship contention. One of the big things right now is LeBron's talking about how many rings he wants, by the time he retires. Me personally, I think that the Rockets are the best place for him to go in order to get those rings because, again, as I said, we have some of the best talent to be able to put around him. We already play a very beneficial style for him to jump right into. It's pretty ISO heavy. It allows for him to improvise a lot, and it's going to be a little bit different than the Heat's offense and the Heat's system, but I think it is a really good fit for LeBron.
Well, the one thing that I'd have to say against that only is you're exactly right. Houston would be right up there in the conversation, but there was a little bit of talk. It's kind of faded now, but there was a little bit of talk about the Clippers taking a run at LeBron. And a scenario like that would just be mind-blowing. I believe that would be one of the best teams you saw out there on the court. That being said, I don't believe it's going to happen. I think LeBron does have a better chance of ending up in Houston. One thing I can say is I really don't think they're going to end up back in Miami. I did, for the longest time, I thought they were going back to the Heat. At this point, I just don't think it's going to happen. It seems like everything is falling apart right now for that team.
I don't know. The more I look at to just jump onto that Clippers thing, that team as it is right now that is making its runs, it cannot stay as it is currently constructed and go pick up LeBron. I believe from the numbers I've been looking at, they would have to at least get rid of DeAndre Jordan, and when you take him away, I'm not sure that you are necessarily going to be able to compete. I think you would fall into a lot of the same pitfalls that the Heat are falling into when they play against teams that have bigger lineups, especially out west, where teams like Memphis, you have to deal with teams like Memphis, Houston, obviously has Dwight Howard over there. I think that, you have Golden State and Andrew Bogut and David Lee, and they can play pretty well, and they're, pretty big guys who can play in the post. I think that if you were to take DeAndre Jordan off of that Clippers team and basically in exchange for LeBron, yeah, they would be incredibly explosive on the offensive end. Obviously, LeBron's going to bring a lot of great defensive hard work and intensity there, but as much as hard work and intensity can be big, I'm not sure they would be able to keep up with the big boys in the West. Also, as far as where, them coming back to Miami or not, I'm not sure, actually. When free agency first started and when LeBron first opted out and then Bosh did, or then Wade did and then Bosh did, I was really confident. I was sitting there going, there's no way they're going back to Miami after that.
See, I'll jump in for a second. I actually thought the exact opposite. Because in my opinion, my thoughts were those guys opting out meant they were going to take lesser contracts to stay in Miami and keep the team together. That was my initial thought on things. And now, real quick, but things are coming out that LeBron James is now seeking a max contract, which honestly he deserves.
Well, he said that a week ago. I mean, we knew that he wanted a max contract a week ago. The thing is that really jumps off the page for me is that Miami needs to bring in a fourth person to go with the big three. The three amigos down there. They need to bring in that fourth person. Basically, they need to do it before free agency gets over with. And the more that I'm looking at the offers that are out there for Melo right now, the teams that are in the big contention right now are New York and LA. I don't see him going to LA with that team as it's currently constructed, unless LeBron and him get together and they both say they want to go there.
Well, Chicago's still a possibility also.
Chicago and New York and LA were the only teams to offer Melo a max deal.
What it comes down to, and my take on Melo is he's probably going to go after the max deal.
Agreed.
He's one. I don't know. Carmelo Anthony, I honestly would not want him on my team. I wouldn't go chasing him. I'm sorry. I mean,
let me. Well, hold on. Just let me amend something I just said about the max deal thing. The Knicks and the Lakers are the only teams that have publicly said that they have offered him a max deal. Yeah, no other team has publicly said that they have offered him a max deal. Both of those teams have publicly said that they gave him max money. I don't know about the other teams 100% because they have not said.
Okay. All right. Yeah. I have no idea. I don't know who's making the best pitch to him or whatnot. He's definitely in better shape than LeBron James. Or LeBron James, there could be a lot of fallout for where he ends up. I mean, people love to hate LeBron James. They really
Absolutely.
do. And, I guess that's what makes the story so big and why every time you turn it on ESPN, there's another story about LeBron James when there actually is no news. Even now we're talking about it, there really is no news. There's a few teams that are definitely going to be in the run for his services, and even some teams he didn't expect. Phoenix is a team that's going after him. Don't think they'll get him, but they are a team that's going after him. Obviously, we just talked about Houston as another one. There's a few places he could end up. And I can't wait to see where he ends up. I mean, that's just...
I think that point that you made about him sort of being stuck between a rock and a hard place as far as what his decision is going to be. I mean, if he goes back to Cleveland, he's sort of the pariah, the returning, the prodigal son, if you will. who's returning home. Then again, he's also leaving Miami at the same time after leaving Cleveland to go there to win championships. Now that Cleveland's actually put together a pretty decent nucleus, now suddenly he wants to go back there. I'm not sure that he'd be welcomed with, the same open arms that he might be expecting.
Yeah, but they would. Yes, but if they win their first championship, those open arms are going to be there, and they'll be there forever for as long as he stays there.
Yeah, but it's always going to be contaminating his legacy. Like, is he just the guy that goes and chases a great team? I mean, I saw a post today on Facebook talking about how LeBron, it was a joke, but it was saying that LeBron wouldn't go to any team that, isn't the dream team. And it's sort of true, I mean, if you're looking at the way that he's sort of constructed his career so far, he seems to be the guy who wants to tell a team what coach to hire, what personnel to put around him. Then he leaves the Cavaliers in an absolute mess because they listened to what he wanted. He goes to Miami and wins championships there. Now that Cleveland's rebuilt themselves, suddenly he wants to go back there. That's not. I don't see that as being a good thing for his long-term legacy.
And knock Miami to the ground because, come on, let's face it. If neither of those three guys sign in Miami, I think Dwayne Wade will be.
Yeah, agreed. I was just going to say that. I don't think there's any chance that Dwayne Wade leaves Miami.
But even that being said, and Dwayne Wade, right now, he's got some hard miles on his body for his age. He actually is playing much older than he is. And so Miami's going to be left to shambles if those two leave. Because talking about another free agent here, and somebody that I'd say in the last 2 weeks, I've really actually, since the finals through the playoffs, is Chris Bosh. Be honest with you, he's a player I'd love to have on my team.
Yeah, I mean, he's a much better defender than he was when he left Toronto. He can actually defend the post now. I think the big defensive play that everyone is going to remember about Chris Bosh for forever is going to be that block that he had, last year in the finals on Ray Allen. Or, on Danny Green.
Absolutely. I think he falls in the shadows of LeBron and Dwayne Wade, but he's a player I would absolutely love if the Celtics got him at his age and everything today, even right now. I would be super excited. I'd be super excited.
The thing that's left out of the Chris Bosh conversation as well is, they talk about, because when he was with Toronto, he was such a good offensive scorer in the low post, and that's sort of gone by the wayside since he's joined Miami. But the thing that's really left out of the equation that you really only see, the stats don't always bear it out or whatever, but the thing that you see when you watch him play is the passing skills that Chris Bosh can put on display.
He can. I've noticed his passing skills, and you know me, I love passers anyways. And he's got a very, very good game. And on another team, when you remember he was on Toronto, he was the man. And on another team he would be also. And the more I just think about him and the possibilities of where he can go, and there's talk right now. Be honest with you, I think Houston's got a better chance and probably will get Bosh opposed to LeBron.
I mean, honestly, if we can get Bosh, that would be my. I'm not going to say that I'd rather have Bosh over LeBron, but I think I would rather have Bosh over Melo. I think Bosh is a much better fit. Again, he's a good defender. He can pass. You look at his numbers throughout his career. When he was on Toronto, he was a 20 and 10 guy almost every year. He goes to Miami and he adopts a smaller role. His points per game numbers drop. His rebounding numbers drop. His assist numbers were pretty high for a big guy when he was with Toronto. I think that if you put him on the Houston team, the way that they run their offense, where it's so open-ended and so sort of freewheeling, there's not really a strict system in place, I think that that's really going to benefit a player like him.
And he's always got that opportunity to pop out and hit the three. And for a big man like that
absolutely.
to hit that three, nowadays, and it's something we've touched upon before too, is kind of the new NBA where your power forwards are the guys who are popping out to hit those threes now. And
I mean, imagine the Houston series this year with Chris Bosh suddenly, or if they run into Portland next year in the playoffs, suddenly they actually have someone who can cover LaMarcus Aldridge and not just cover him, but if he starts shooting mid-range jumpers on the offensive end, he can go down to the offensive end and do the same thing. We didn't have that. We might have been able to guard him with Omer Asik this year, but they run down to the other end of the floor, and Omer Asik is not going to put up, a 45-point game.
Right. Exactly. Do you foresee in any way, like Bosh and Dwayne Wade staying with Miami together, but LeBron moving off?
Honestly, man, like, I think that, if LeBron leaves, I think Bosh is gone. I think that's sort of set in stone. I think the second LeBron says, okay, like, I've got better offers on the table, guys, sorry, I'm going somewhere else, I think Bosh is going to say the same thing. He's going to go after, another team that's more in position to win now, because at the end of the day, Chris Bosh has 11 seasons on his body, I believe. He's not a young NBA player anymore. I think
no, he's not, but I think he's far from done too.
Oh no, he's definitely far from done, but he's at the point in his career where he's chasing rings, not necessarily just chasing rings, but he's going to go to a place where he has the best opportunity to win a ring.
Absolutely.
Not necessarily for loyalty to Miami, because LeBron's gone, and without LeBron, especially with an aging D-Wade, I'm not sure what that team has.
And honestly, if you break it down, I think it's one of the reasons people love to hate LeBron, love to hate the Heat and so forth. But at the end of the day, if they really end up leaving and so forth, was there ever any loyalty to Miami? Or was it just loyalty to themselves by putting themselves together to be in that position?
I mean, that's a great question. I think that Pat Riley did a great job of selling them on Miami, but at the end of the day, I think that each one of those guys, except for maybe with the exception of Dwayne Wade, I think, Bosh and LeBron in particular, they want to be guys who are, cemented either as the greatest of all time in LeBron's case, or a guy who's going to be in the Basketball Hall of Fame for something. And honestly, like, Bosh has put up some great numbers, but I don't see him as being one of the, all-time, even 50 greatest players of all time.
No,
he's got a lot of
not
rings.
at all. But you start him power forward on a championship team, absolutely.
Oh yeah, if he goes from Miami where he's won 2 rings, you move him to Houston. Let's just say, and I'm not saying that this is going to happen because of Bosh or whatever, but let's just say that they win 2 or 3 rings. Suddenly he's a power forward who brought championships from Miami to Houston because he went there. And that's his legacy, and suddenly he becomes a top 50 power forward of all time, even though he might not necessarily be there. And that's the legacy I think that he is probably chasing. LeBron is chasing the greatest of all time label or stamp, or trying to get in that conversation, which, I think he is in that conversation, even though I don't think he's there. I think that's what he's trying to chase. I think Chris Bosh is trying to become known for the rest of the time, for the rest of the time in the NBA that the NBA is together. I think that he's going to be trying to remember as a winner.
I'll buy that. Well, talking about hitting back on loyalty and, huge amounts of loyalty, and just 2 class acts absolutely altogether was Dirk Nowitzki, Tim Duncan. Both those guys signing their contracts, 3 years, low money because they could have got more money elsewhere. And both of those guys basically doing what they're doing for their team. It's just, those guys are throwbacks to me. That's what I like to see. You spend your whole career in a place, and,
Well, hold on a second. Let's Tim Duncan, let's be fair. I don't think that it's really necessarily fair to say that he is necessarily hugely loyal. I think he is a very loyal player, but right after you win a championship on a team that basically isn't losing anything of their championship formula, they still have their, one of the greatest coaches in NBA history. It's not like he's necessarily leaving a dumpster fire there.
No, I understand. No.
Or staying with a
dumpster
fire.
I understand that. I understand that entirely, but I just think both guys just, they took care of their contracts. They're team-friendly contracts. And that's just the way I see it. And, maybe not so much what they're doing this year, any of the contracts they signed, but I just like seeing those guys stay where they are, retire where they are. I just like seeing throwbacks, a player who plays for the same team their entire career, and it's just something I like to see. And both those
So we're
players
talking about
are,
loyal.
yeah, I just think they're throwbacks. But go ahead.
So we're talking about loyalty right now, and so I think that sort of is a big part of the decision for two other bigger free agents. One of them is obviously Carmelo Anthony, who we haven't really talked about too much. Um, I'm sort of interested to see what you think. Where loyalty lands with him, and also Eric Bledsoe. I mean, he's got the option to return to the Suns, who were a good team last year. Eric Bledsoe could be one of the better young guards in the NBA. You put him on a championship team as opposed to just a playoff team. I wonder where he would be. I wonder how much loyalty you think holds him in Phoenix or sends him somewhere else.
Well, I don't believe, and he's a player. I don't. I think it's actually a person I don't like as much as a player. But Carmelo, I think he's chasing. I think he chases and break it down. He's a loser. He's a loser. His teams do better when he's not there. So I'm just not a fan, and I don't believe Carmelo's going to take you. I was so glad to hear you would be happier with Bosch than Carmelo as a Rockets fan. When I heard you say that, then you get it. You understand. And you can hate on him. Sometimes I think it's unfair. I think LeBron gets a bad rap every so often because so many people do hate on him. But Carmelo's just somebody I don't like, and I would not want him on my team. And I would not.
See, I actually disagree with that. I think that Bosch is a better fit for Houston than Melo, but I don't think that Melo is necessarily. I mean, you use the phrase "loser." I don't think that that's him at all. I think that he's been chasing the wrong role, and he's been put in the wrong role for a lot of years as far as what he is expected to do for a team. Melo, you look at him when he actually has a healthy team around him, and it doesn't happen often, or, a good team around him, and it doesn't happen very often. But you watch him when he plays on, the USA team. You watch him when he plays in the All-Star game, which, the All-Star game can be sort of shoved aside a little bit because honestly it's an exhibition game. It's not taken as seriously, but, there are a couple, competitive moments, and when he's in the game for those, he shows that he can make the right pass, that he actually averages almost 8 rebounds a game for his entire career, which is, not a guy that shows that he's just chasing points. Shows a guy that actually is willing to chase what needs to be done to win. Rebounding is not easy in the NBA. He's a guy that I think is been put in the wrong role by a lot of teams. I think that if he were to end up on a team like actually Phoenix, who is a very run and gun team that would feed him the ball on the perimeter where he could shoot, that he would be put sort of in a system where he would, either take his shot option or pass it off to the next guy that's going to be open. I think that is the system that fits Melo. He's been sort of put into all these systems, and a lot of people think of him as a very ISO-heavy player because of the systems he's been put in. I mean, you look at the Knicks. Who else is going to score on that Knicks team? J.R. Smith, that's not somebody that's going to carry your team. Tyson Chandler, Raymond Felton, that nobody else on that team is going to carry points for you. He's been having to carry the load for that Knicks team as far as points goes. Same thing goes when he was in Denver. He had to carry that team as far as points goes. You put him on a team with other guys who can score. I'm intrigued by what he can do.
I'm not doubting his talent at all. I'm not doubting his talent. He is one of the best scorers in the NBA. At this point, I just don't buy every year he's been in the league. I mean, his teams have not done that great. I know you said he hasn't had great teams.
His teams have been bad.
Systems and so forth, and I just don't buy into it. I mean, this dates way, way back with me. I just always had issues with Carmelo, and maybe it's more me than anything. I'm just not a fan. Maybe it's where my fandom comes into play here, but I'm not throwing him to max money. Not him. He's not going to be the guy who's going to take my team to championship. He's not going to be the guy who's going to have a statue outside my Coliseum. I'm sorry. He's just
So how much money would you toss him?
for Carmelo. I
Yeah.
believe me, if I could get him on a deal, I'd get him on a deal. I mean, you have to.
If you're
And a
sitting
lot
in the
has
GM,
to do with, obviously, a lot has to do with the team. There are some intriguing things out there. If he does end up in Chicago, something like that. I mean, there's no doubt they're going to be a much, much better team. And, maybe he will win me over. Maybe he picks the right team this year. Maybe he ends up in Houston, for all I know. And Houston goes out and wins the championship. I just think that Carmelo kind of needs to, I don't know, maybe it's grow up a little bit and sacrifice a little bit more for the team. Let me see the hard-nosed defense. Let me
see when he hasn't been having to carry his team. Look, I don't think Melo is the greatest player in the league. I don't think he's the best even scorer in the league. I think he's in this conversation for, he's a top 5 scorer in the league, but give me an example when Melo hasn't been having his entire team on his shoulders, carrying his team for every single win that they get during a season. I mean, you take Jeremy Lin's rise to stardom out of the equation in New York, and suddenly that team has a very bleak outlook with Melo off the court for that.
Well,
team.
like I said, it should be very interesting this year. Obviously, I don't believe he's going to stay in New York, and to be honest with you, I'm not so sure New York even wants him back. So, he's going to go to a place where he has a very good chance to win, and I'll be very interested to see what he does with a decent team around him. And maybe I'll change my attitude. I'm absolutely open. I think it was as far back as a month and a half ago that I was telling you over and over again that I thought the Rockets would end up with him, and it could be a good fit. And you were actually more against Carmelo at the time. Now, I know you still say Bosh would be a better fit on the Rockets.
I think there are a lot of guys that would be better fits on the Rockets than Melo, but I don't think that it's necessarily fair to label Melo as a loser because he's been in situations where the system doesn't fit his style of play. I think that you put Melo on the Rockets and he's just going to continue to be an ISO-heavy player who's doing his own thing.
Like you said at the beginning of the conversation, you put LeBron basically on any team, and they're going to be in the conversation as one of the better teams in the NBA, regardless of what team they put him on. To an extent, obviously. You put him on the Celtics of Philadelphia, and good luck. And maybe I'm entirely wrong. Maybe if you put him on the Celtics of Philadelphia, he ends up like Carmelo. So it's something I want to see. That's one of the reasons it's the story I'm following. It's one of the reasons that I'm open to change my attitude about people if they show it to me. But so far in his career, he just hasn't shown. To me, it just seems like it's all about him. And I know you're saying he had to carry his team, but I am always a team first player. And like you said, Chris Bosh goes over to Miami, his stats drop and this, that. Of course they do, because he's sacrificing for the team. And I'd like to see that with Carmelo. And if I see it, hey, I'll be the first one to say, good job, man.
Okay. So I tried to ask you this when you were talking about Melo. So if you're sitting in a GM seat and you're sitting down across the table from Melo, what number do you put in front of him as far as the number that you want him for? What you said you don't think he's a max guy. I think that your definition of a max guy is a guy that you send him to any team and any playoff team and suddenly that team becomes a contender for the finals. A Durant, a LeBron, that kind of guy. I think that Melo is a max guy. I think that you look at the guys around the league who have gotten max contracts, whether it's James Harden, Dwight Howard, Durant, LeBron. You look at all the guys around the league who have max contracts. I think that Melo is definitely in that category as far as max contract
you got me.
guys.
Yeah, I mean, you got me. You got me there. You got me there with the max contracts, which are out there right now. He's in the conversation, and he's one of the better players in the league. What can I say? He is, and like I said, I'm not doubting his talent at all. And I guess no, I guess you're right. I guess he is max money. It's just that if I'm the GM of a team, I don't want this guy to be the one to I just don't want him to be the one to lead my team into the future. That's all.
So the other name that I brought up was Eric Bledsoe, and again, we were talking about loyalty a little while ago as far as like what keeps who where. Do you think that loyalty keeps Eric Bledsoe in Phoenix, or do you think he's going to be looking for somewhere else, and if so, where?
How long has he been in Phoenix? He hasn't been there all that long. Phoenix, it's an intriguing one with Phoenix because right now I think Phoenix is in pursuit of a decent point guard. And I think they're trying to do better than Bledsoe. I think Rondo comes up in a conversation every so often with Phoenix. I think Rondo would be a player that they would love to get their hands on. So I don't know how much of it and how much of the signing, is laying on Bledsoe, is laying on Phoenix. And I have no idea what's been offered to him yet. I actually think is an underrated player. You don't hear his name called that often, but he is definitely a very, very good point guard.
Oh, yeah, I think you watch him play, he's one of the more exciting point guards in the league. He's got the size of a 2 guard, he's got the handles of a 1. He can score pretty well. This year especially, he really showed that he can, I don't want to say carry a team because he did average less than 20 points a game, but he still had almost 18 points a game this year. Again, I think that he's more of a shooting guard. He's listed as a point guard across the league. I think that everyone knows that Goran Dragic runs that team from the point. I guess sort of to get sidetracked here, because we like to do that on this show, is talk about contingencies or whatever. One of the things that I'm intrigued by, because I thought of it while you were talking about the Rondo to Phoenix rumor, is I've heard two big rumors now that come up a lot. One of them that has come up more frequently recently is Rondo to Phoenix for Dragic, Dragic going back to Boston.
Actually, the one that if I'll just jump in, I'll let you go right back to it. But the one I'm hearing along that lines is Rondo to Phoenix, Dragic to Indiana. And they haven't really said what the Celtics would get. But go on.
Okay, so I hadn't heard that one yet. Obviously, you listen to more of the Boston talk radio. The other one that I heard a lot of, and I think it's more of a pipe dream for Houston fans, is some package of Jeremy Lin and somebody for Rondo to bring Rondo to Houston. I guess my question is now with Marcus Smart in the mix for Boston, the Dragic rumor has come up since the draft. I still have heard some mutterings about Jeremy Lin ending up in Boston, not necessarily for Rondo, but still ending up in Boston. I guess my question is why do you think that Boston wants to go with more of the attacking style point guard of a Jeremy Lin, a Marcus Smart, a Goran Dragic? Do you think it's like that they're trying to get somebody who can carry their team and run the offense, or is it just that they are, that Brad Stevens likes a scoring point guard? What's the deal there? Because they are definitely going after scoring point guards more than the pass-first guy that Rondo is.
Well, I think one of the problems that the team has recognized that they've had over the last couple of years is they were getting very little scoring production out of their guards. Avery Bradley has really stepped it up last year. His shooting's gotten much better. Word on the street is that's what he's doing again this offseason, is working on that offensive game. And I think it's just something that the Celtics are really looking for, is more offensive style play out of their guards. And scoring, especially last year, was just a huge problem for the team. And, I think now that the team's getting younger and so forth, you got Brad Stevens, he does like to push the ball. But at the same time, he's a very defensive coach, too. So I don't think it's going to be a run-and-gun style offense that they're going for. But I just think they're trying to get better production out of guard play.
So that's an interesting point that you bring up about Stevens being a defensive-minded coach first. Both of those guys that are sort of in that conversation, Rondo is a much better defender than both of them. So I guess it is.
See,
are they looking for somebody to sort of be a sixth guy off the bench to provide scoring and for the guards?
well, what the problem is, and this is what it comes down to, is that they just know. I think they just really know at this point that if they hang on to Rondo, he's going to lead this team because he's another player, and you almost can't blame him. At his age and so forth, he's a player who wants to go to a winning team, and you can't blame him. And he could be in a position to go to a team and help a team win a championship. He's already won a championship as a point guard, so the Celtics are in a position right now that the question is, what can they get for him and how much can they get for him? And so, dealing with Houston, and I think earlier tonight you were talking about who would want Houston's picks anyways, which is true, but a pick is a pick. And if, the Celtics, the reason they would take a Lin on that team would be more to make something else work, be it contracts, be it, draft picks or whatnot, future draft picks. They'll need a contract to do it because Lin will be off the books before long. So, they're a team that will lead a couple. They're sitting on a couple contracts right now. They're trying to get out of. So that's just what they will do because they just try and build as many assets as they can. So I don't believe that they would be a team that think Jeremy Lin could, lead them to where they want to go. The more I'm seeing about Smart, it seems like the Celtics are willing to let this guy be the leader of the team out there.
I don't know, man. I know we weren't really going to talk about the Summer League too much. I did catch the Celtics game today against the Heat. If they're thinking that Smart's going to, I'd be worried about with Smart, I'd be worried about sort of the common pitfall that a lot of NFL teams fall into where they go out and they draft a rookie quarterback and they put him under center right away and he gets banged up so bad that, or, he becomes gun shy or whatever, and suddenly this guy who was this potential great talent was played too early and might not necessarily be able to develop into something that can actually lead, somebody that can actually lead a team. I think he sort of saw that with Blaine Gabbert in Jacksonville, but just based off of what I saw of Marcus Smart today in the Summer League, I don't see him being. I mean, he had a decent game, but against NBA talent, you try to put Marcus Smart up against Patrick Beverley. Beverly's going to eat him alive. It's just, at the end of the day, there's a whole other level when you're talking about playing against rookies and sophomores in the NBA versus the proven vets that know what they're doing and can really, whether it's on defense or offense, can really chew up a guard. I mean, I would be a little bit worried about them putting too much on Marcus Smart's shoulders.
My honest answer is, I don't know. He's right in that range right there that I actually don't know. He could flourish, or he could not. He could go the right direction you're thinking. So I honestly, I have no idea. It should be, fun and interesting to watch, but I have no idea whatsoever. And obviously, you can't take one game that you saw Summer League, although I'm sure you're looking at more than the game. I know the way you watch basketball, probably the same way I watch basketball. And it's much deeper than just watching the game and what's going on out there. And it'll be interesting because when we get off tonight, I'm going to watch the game. And, maybe I'll form an opinion. But obviously, one Summer League game earlier tonight, I think I mentioned, if Summer League had anything to do with it, Kelly Olynyk would be Dwight Howard.
Yeah, that's a good point.
So it should be interesting to see, if you're going to say that on a player that you love, the player that LeBron loves, Shabazz Napier. What is that saying? He doesn't stand a chance in the NBA, but
don't get me wrong. I'm not saying that he's not going to stand a chance. The difference being is that when you look at Shabazz Napier, and again, based off of LeBron, Wade, and Bosh staying, potentially bringing in, let's just say for the sake of argument that the Heat bring back all three, they're able to restructure two of their contracts and bring Bosh into the equation. Suddenly, Napier, he's not being expected to carry the load of that team. He's not carrying their offensive weight. He's not the guy that the press is going to every night to talk to. He doesn't have the stress and the pressures of being the leader of a team. Marcus Smart, if they actually want to play him, you already look at the way that the media sort of handles talking about and talking to Marcus Smart. He is the guy, and if they, if he's not a guy that can rise to that, if they can't put something around him to sort, I don't want to say like distract the attention, but if they can't do something to get the eyes off of Smart a little bit, I'm a little bit worried about where his development is going to go.
Yeah, but you know what, John? I believe that the Celtics would go to him if they move Rondo. First, I believe if they do move Rondo, they'd probably bring in another point guard who could start above Smart. Let Smart get his feet wet in the league. But I believe that if they did throw him into the starting position for this year, maybe even next year, the Celtics are going to come to him and tell him straight up, we don't need you to win. Winning right now is not important. Development is important because that's what they're trying to do.
You can say that, but at the end of the day, everyone who gets to the NBA has such a competitive streak in them, except for maybe Andrew Bynum, has such a competitive streak in them that they're not going to be able to handle losing consistently.
Hey, I'm not gonna vouch that I watched all his games this year and followed him inside and out, but everything I've seen and read and so forth, it's a tough dude. It's a tough dude right there, and it's probably going to take a lot to break this guy. And he's one of the most tenacious players. He may be one of the most tenacious players coming out of the entire draft. If you could get somebody,
I think him and Randall are very similar in that
exactly.
respect.
You're going to get somebody who's going to dive into the fourth row to get a ball. It's going to be him.
Yeah.
So it should be interesting to see, but I think he does need to understand that the Celtics do not need him to win right now, and that they are in a position at the same time. And I think if you really take a look at what they have for assets and so forth and what they're building for, I actually think they have a direction. If they have a direction, but at the same time, they're the Boston Celtics. So if they have an opportunity tomorrow to do something to make that team a contending team, they're going to do it. Let's put it that way. But their plan is in place, and it should be interesting. We get a little bit off topic here, but I'm going to jump on somebody right now real quick, getting us back to the free agency. Somebody who might have knocked over all the dominoes in Miami. And that's Kyle Lowry re-signing with the Raptors. Sticking with a point guard for a moment here. He might have been the one to make all the dominoes fall in Miami, too. Because, they were going after him, and he might have been the difference maker to get the three of those players to sign. I actually, I like the signing by Toronto. They lock him up for 4 years, and he's a decent player, and he's only going to get better.
Yeah, I'm a really big Lowry fan. Obviously he played in Houston for a while, and there was a bad breakup between us. I liked watching him play there. I think that his game has only gotten better. And honestly, Kyle Lowry is one of those guys who you let him go and you think he's an average point guard. He might even be a good point guard in the future, but he's average right now. And then he goes to another team and suddenly he becomes the leader of that team and he does a whole bunch of stuff.
Right.
A whole bunch of good stuff. The thing with Lowry that I think is really positive for Toronto is he has a history of being hard to work with, whether it was with Houston, whether it was in college. I think he went to Villanueva. He's one of those guys who has that mentality who, honestly, and I don't think that Marcus Smart is necessarily going to be the same way, but I see a lot of Marcus Smart in him as far as his competitive drive, the way he plays the game, which is sort of a bowling ball kind of a way of playing with it, sort of with reckless abandon. And it works for him, and it works because of his size. And I think he's shorter than Marcus Smart, but they have a very similar body style.
Oh,
And
great similarities when you mentioned that, because one of the first things I believe on draft night, I sent the Josh text to Josh saying Marcus Smart is Deron Williams and Kyle Lowry put
yeah,
together. That's Marcus Smart, you know, and I'll buy that. But I mean, they have a point guard, and for what Toronto did this season, and I think the team has a lot to be excited about right now. And for what they did this season, it was a good story. Seems to fit in pretty well with that team. So I like the signing.
yeah, I do too. Another guy that I just want to touch on real fast is, each of us, I'm sure, has our, the guys that we're sort of more intrigued by as far as the story goes. I'm really intrigued, honestly, by Detroit. Um, I watched what they did last offseason, and I got really excited. I thought that this team, I'm actually probably on record somewhere saying that Detroit is going to be the dark horse in the East. They obviously weren't. They still were pretty bad. You look at Greg Monroe. They have Andre Drummond. I don't think Josh Smith was the right fit there. Greg Monroe is a restricted free agent this year. I'm wondering what Detroit does. Do they stick with the Twin Towers and try to keep Andre Drummond? And, obviously, I don't think they're going to be able to unload Josh Smith anywhere after the season he had. So, are they going to be able to keep Greg Monroe? Are they going to dump him to get rid of his contract? He's a good big, and I'm wondering if he might fit. The first place that actually comes to mind as far as where he could be a decent fit is Boston. He's a very solid player. He can score in the post, which is something that the Celtics have sorely needed. He's 6'11" or 7 feet tall. He's not going to wow you on defense, but he plays solid D. He can get rebounds mostly because of his height. I like his game. He's smart, and he can pass the ball pretty well. So, playing in that Georgetown offense in college, that's an interesting fit for me.
He's a very intriguing player, definitely, because I'm really not sure where he's at in his career right now. He's 24 years old. He's definitely young enough. He has showed flashes, but his career, it's kind of a tricky one. I definitely would want to. I actually thought about him on the Celtics a couple times, and I don't know. I'm not sure. Is Greg Monroe as a power forward, anyways? Is he that much better or any better than Solinger?
Oh, absolutely. I don't think for me, that's not a question in my mind. I think.
See, I actually think Solinger has a higher ceiling.
Greg Monroe brings a level of the game that Jared Sullinger is never going to be able to match, and that's his passing and court awareness from the post. He can score better from the post than Sullinger. He has the passing and post awareness skills. I think that Sullinger is a slightly better defender because he's harder to move.
Well, I think the one thing that has gotten on me this past season about Sullinger is his willingness to take the 3-pointers, way too much, and so forth. But I don't know. Monroe is one of those players to me who's pretty much right there on the bubble as being a decent player, but not quite there yet. And it just, I'd like to see what happens. It'd be interesting actually to see him on one of the better teams in the league too.
Yeah, as a Rockets fan, I'm telling you, man, if we went out and picked up Greg Monroe, I would not be ashamed or angry at that pickup at all. Obviously it would be contingent on money. If we tossed him $16 million to come play for us, yeah, I'd be furious at it. If we gave him somewhere in the ballpark of 6 to 8 a year, yeah, absolutely. That guy is, even
4 years, 32. I'd do that in a heartbeat.
Yeah, that's all I'm saying. Greg Monroe, he's a solid enough player. He's almost 7 feet tall. He can shoot away from the basket, which is something we need. And again, on a team with Howard, with Harden, if we can bring Parsons back, a guy who can pass the ball from the post is a really huge asset.
All right, I'll buy that on Houston. I'll buy that. Real quick question, jumping to Houston, real quick, and we'll get back to the free agents here in a second. But as a point guard. Now, Houston could definitely use a point guard here. If they could get Rondo, would you rather them see get Rondo or an Eric Bledsoe?
Ooh, that's a good question. I think before I answer that, I would need to see what they would do with the small forward and power forward spots, honestly. If we went with a guy who can score in the low post, let's say we go out and get Chris Bosh, somebody who can pass, who can score, do those things, sort of the same things I was saying about Greg Monroe. Yeah, I'd rather have Eric Bledsoe. He's younger, he can score. He's not as proven as Ron. Well, no, okay. Let me straight up say this. I would take Rondo over Eric Bledsoe any day of the week. Doesn't matter what team I'm on. I would rather have a guy like Rondo who's a proven commodity. I don't care about the injury history. He plays great defense. I would take Rondo over Bledsoe any day of the week.
Right. I saw what was happening. I mean, your coaching was coming into play there because, like you were saying, you had this guy, and maybe Bledsoe is going to be a better asset to your team. But I mean, I don't even think right now they're even in the same conversation.
Oh,
no. Bledsoe's got a nice ceiling ahead of him. He's a player. He's another guy who's only getting better right now, and he hasn't had the full opportunity, and he showed what he could do. I'd like to see his passing get a little bit better.
Again, he's not the point guard of that team. If you watch them play this year,
right,
he might bring the ball up, but at the end of the day, Dragic is their point guard. He's the guy who racks up all the assists. Bledsoe, I think, had 6 assists, something like that.
He did 5.5.
5.5, yeah, okay, yep. So I was right in the ballpark. Yep. So, at the end of the day, he was their 2 guard. Dragic was their 1 guard. The way I was starting to answer that question when I was talking about where players fit is just because it was the way I interpreted it was, do I want a pass first point guard or do I want a scoring first point guard on the Houston team? And I guess the way that I would answer that is I would say that we need somebody who, again, it depends on what positions we fill around us. If we go out and we get somebody who's a good defensive power forward, or say we go out and get LeBron, or I would say that we need somebody who's gonna be able to score, from the point position as well. If we get LeBron, I think we need a defensive point guard, but somebody who can play D at the 4 spot, I think we need to go get a score first point guard. We go out and get an offensively skilled big, like a Chris Bosh, like Kevin Love is a great example of that. I know we're talking a lot about trying to get him in a trade. If we go out and we get an offensively good big, I think we absolutely desperately need a pass first guy who can play great defense. Rajon Rondo is a great fit there. People might say, well, you already have Patrick Beverley. I don't think his passing skills are on par to keep up with a team of superstars that has like a Kevin Love, James Harden, and Dwight Howard on that team.
Oh my God, Rondo would just be, it'd be insane. He is absolutely leading the NBA in assists. No doubt about it on a team like that. He would love it. And to be honest with you, just because you're my partner in crime here when it comes to basketball. If Rondo leaves, that's where I want to see him go. Only because I've been following Houston more lately, more than I have probably my whole life in the last year or so, because of you. And I would love to see that happen. I would love to see him play on that team, even as constituted. Even as, you get Parsons back, you throw Rondo into the mix on that team, you got something. Definitely. I'd love to see it happen.
So one of the other intriguing guys that I'm sort of looking at, and I sort of threw this idea out there because I thought it was more of a joke. I was talking to another friend of mine that I play on men's league with, and we were sort of joking about the most disturbing backcourt in the NBA, and I thought the matchup of, if Houston were to go out and sign Lance Stevenson and bring him to Houston, and have Patrick Beverley and Lance Stevenson guarding people in the same backcourt. I thought that would be absolutely terrifying. But one of the, what do you think the prospects are for Lance Stevenson right now?
That's an interesting one. I'm not even actually sure where the Pacers are at there, but are they planning on keeping him around or hoping to keep him around?
Well, what about this? So you said that you were
I mean,
thinking about
I'm looking here
Hold
that
on, whoa. Wait a sec. So you said you were talking about Rondo to Phoenix, Dragic to Indiana. What if Indiana sent Stevenson to Boston, and then you had Marcus Smart and Lance Stevenson in the same backcourt? That's not awful.
um, I'm not sold on Stevenson.
Fair.
I'm not sold on Stevenson at all. I think he's lacking. Um, I don't know. He's lacking that it factor for your team to be a championship. And I mean, you could have a better talent. Going back to some of the stuff I was saying about Carmelo, and not to the extent, but I'm just not sold on him right quite yet. I do see here that they did throw an offer to him, 5 years, and he did turn it down. 5 year, $44 million, he turned down.
Yeah, and I mean, like, that kind of money, that is a really interesting development. I actually hadn't heard that news. So, with that kind of money for a player his caliber, I don't know. He's a weird guy. I think he thinks that he's better than he is, and because he thinks he's better than he is, he sort of plays better than he is. At the same time, it makes him think that he's, a 5 year, $60 million guy, not a 44 guy. I think it puts him in a weird spot.
Well, you know, talking about the Pacers for a moment, they definitely had mental breakdowns during the playoffs and so forth, and body language on that team and so forth. And I think he was just as much part of it as anybody else was. And I was just not impressed with that team throughout the playoffs and so forth.
I don't think anyone was. I was very frustrated with the matchup that ended up happening. I was excited all year for the Miami Heat to play the Indiana Pacers. The games that ended up coming out of that series were just, I don't want to say they were bad, but they were so much more covered in what is wrong with the Pacers instead of, wow, what great basketball we're watching right now.
Exactly. And a lot of it, I've never actually seen the team, and like I say, he was just as much part of it. With a body language like that, I would be embarrassed as a player, coach, front office, anybody, to see my team, just fall apart like that. Even in defeat, the teams that are going to get better in Indiana, has a lot of talent. They're a young team, and they're actually in the right place. They could use one more player, but something about that team this past year, and I lump him in with everybody else there. Unfortunately, I do, but he was part of it. If you go back and you look at some of the film, he was just as much of a problem as anybody else out there. So, he's another one of those players that, as a GM, I'm not crazy about having him on my team. I'd like to have the talent. I'm not so sure I'd like to have the person.
Well, where do you think would be a good landing spot for Lance Stevenson in that case? Like, what team do you think is necessarily built the right way where they can take somebody of that personality, get his skill set, almost sort of do like what the Patriots do to guys, obviously excluding Aaron Hernandez, where they bring in a guy who's sort of a disruptive presence. Suddenly they sort of, indoctrinate him and he they get all of his talent without any of the distraction.
Well, once again, it always comes down to coaching and so forth, and not considering his fit, say, on these teams, but along obviously along the lines of some of the better coaches in the NBA, your Pops, your Coach Pop, your Doc Rivers, and so forth. As for the team that he would go to, I think I actually buy him as being the type of player who would be happier looking good on a bad team.
Yeah, I would agree with that.
Uh, looking good on a bad team, falling into that Carmelo role that we talked about for all those years, carrying the team. I believe that he would be, you know,
I think he would
he'd much
also
rather be.
he would also relish a large market. I mean, an interesting fit for him. And again, they're dealing with their own salary cap issues right now. But an interesting fit for him might be New York.
I was just thinking New York myself. Uh, MSG playing in New York, which every player in the NBA actually should have a want to play in New York. That being said, a lot has to do with the way the teams run, but it's one of those teams that, baseball, like I think that everybody in baseball would love to play for the Yankees at some point, and New York is one of those types of teams. And right now, the way that team is constituted, they lose Carmelo. I think he would love playing there.
Yeah, I mean, I think that if he is the number one, especially you looking at the guys that they got in that Dallas trade, I think that Lance Stevenson and Shane Larkin next to each other would be a good backcourt. Not one of the great ones. I think if you're looking at the future of the NBA, I think that like a Victor Oladipo, Elfrid Payton backcourt in Orlando, I think that's one of the most exciting ones for me. But that's not a bad backcourt at all. I like Shane Larkin in college. I think that putting him next to Lance Stevenson, the way their skill sets sort of complement each other a little bit, with Larkin being a fairly athletic, pass-first guy who can score a bit. Going next to Lance Stevenson, who's a guy who's athletic enough. He can shoot the three. He can pull up inside. He can get to the rim. I think that's a good fit for them. It might
Larkin's
be a good.
Definitely. Larkin's going to be a player that I'm keeping an eye on this year. It should be interesting to see how he does this season.
Yep.
Looking forward to watching him play.
Well, so we're sort of going to try to wrap it up. The last couple podcasts have been a little longer, and we were discussing it, and we're going to try to keep it sort of within the hour range. So we just hit that mark. I think that we covered a lot of free agents that I'm really excited for, unless Steve has any last thoughts on somebody that we haven't touched yet. I think it would be a good opportunity for us to say au revoir.
Well, real quickly, I'd like to touch on the Celtics just for a quick minute. I just want to talk about three players very quickly. First of all, I'm not crazy about the contract itself, but I do like the signing of Avery Bradley back to the Celtics. Wasn't really sold on him, but I think it's worth them taking a shot signing him for the 4 years. $32 million, a little bit steep, right, Avery Bradley, but it still remains to be seen how he pans out. But I'm happy having him as a shooting guard on the Celtics, and is one of the better defenders in the league. Sticking with the Celtics, again, I can see a scenario where Paul Pierce is going to be headed off to Clipperland, and I think that's a great fit. Nice place for him to finish his career with Doc, and then come back and start his next career with the Celtics. And that's something I see totally panning out in the next week or so, where he ends up in LA for his final year. And one player I want to touch on that I actually would love to see the Celtics pick up through this rebuilding stage, and somebody I think could be actually a good fit on the team, is I really like Jordan Hill. For some reason, I like Jordan Hill. I don't want the team to win the season. He'd be a great player just to bring over and have him on that team.
I think Jordan Hill is getting sick of being put on those rebuilding teams. You look at his history, he was with the Rockets for the 3 or 4 years that we were rebuilding and mediocre between while Yao Ming and Tracy were injured. He then went to LA next, I believe. He sort of gotten stuck in the middle of their rebuild. He thought he was going to be a part of a super team when they had, Nash and Dwight and all those guys. And next thing you know, that team implodes. And, I mean, I'm not saying that it would be a bad pickup for Boston, but, the guy, we're talking about a loser before with Melo. I think that Jordan Hill, I mean, he's got a good game, but if any dude is the definition of a loser.
Well, the reason I say that, I just think it would be an interesting pickup for a team like that, because he's always been that player who you could tell is just so close to breaking out, but he just never gets there. Um, he could have actually probably should have been a better player than he is. But he is an intriguing player. But he will definitely show flashes. And then, just real quick, just throwing something out there that went down today that I don't think was a bad pickup for the money at all. Was the Clippers picking up Spencer Hawes, $23 million, 4 years. Not a bad.
The other interesting one was the trade. The Jazz went out and they sent a second-round pick to Toronto for Steve Novak. And it's interesting that teams are starting to pull in those guys that are 7 feet tall, can shoot outside, and don't play any defense whatsoever.
Yeah. The lack of defense kind of scares you, but, the outside shooting is definitely intriguing with some of these guys, and it's the way the NBA seems to be going lately. And I can see it. Honestly, as a player in today's game, why are you going to go full-blown defense when you're going to get called for every knick-knack foul anyways? I mean, you'll foul out in the first half every game if you play defense the way you actually are supposed to play defense. It's a scary league right now.
It is that's a whole other discussion right there. I think that's something that we can totally fill a whole podcast with, honestly, sometime, when we do have more of a down week. They are coming up. But you're absolutely right. I think that there is some defense that needs to be played, but it is interesting watching the league go so far away from, watching that Bad Boys documentary this year. I got sort of more of a taste of what that was like. That was before my time. That was before I was born. I never really got to see those teams play their game. And man, it was a violent sport back then. It was definitely a full contact sport. It's definitely going more toward, there's still contact that happens, obviously, but it's becoming a much softer league, I'd agree.
I definitely think they had some issues back in the day. It might have been too much of a contact sport, but there definitely is a happy medium, and you've got to let the players play. And, at this point, and that's why some of these players today, it would be definitely interesting to see them back in the day. Now, LeBron's such a specimen that he could play in any era. He's that good that he could play in any era. But like we said, that's a conversation for another time, and that's a conversation for a good down week in the NBA. So, hope to talk to everybody next week, and hopefully there's been some real good transactions to talk about, because I love this time of year.
Yeah, agreed. I'm really excited for it. I think that there are going to be some good things for us to talk about, even if we don't have any transactions to hit on. There's definitely going to be some summer league stuff talking about who's looking good and who's looking bad, and I'm really excited to hit this next week. Hopefully we do have a third person who we haven't really talked about too much tonight. Josh, who's normally here, he had some technology issues tonight, and so hopefully we'll be able to get him back next week, and we'll be able to have all three of us here and have a nice, good discussion about everything that's going on in the NBA.
Yeah, I'm sure he'll be back, and I'm sure he'll bring a different take to the game than we do. An interesting take in the fans' perspective and so forth. So it should definitely be interesting, and I'm just looking forward to all that comes up this week and watching a lot of basketball this week.
Absolutely. Good talking to you, man.
Very good talking to you, and we'll see you next time.
Next time.